Let's continue with the topic on alignment. Well, you can go through all the different possibilities here. Take a look. Under horizontal, we can be center, we can be left, it can be right. Let's make it center. Notice the difference when we press enter. And now it may look better, and if you don't think so, you can make it right aligned, or you can change it any other way you wish. Now let's look at the actual what we typed in, the cash accounts receivable, and we'd like to change that so that it's clearer to everybody. Let's type in accounts receivable. So we can do it as follows: accounts receivable, and press enter, and notice you can't see the whole thing. Let's on inventory, let's type in inventory, and you can type it in caps if you wish. Current assets, let's change that as well. Okay, so now what we need to do is expand the first column. We saw this in an earlier module very briefly. To expand it, take the cursor, move it between the A and the B, and double click, and voila, there we have everything is spread out nicer and it fits in. And the cash, just to be consistent, let's type in cash as the others are typed in. Okay, now when we look at this, if we think we'd like to add another row or another column, there's an easy way of doing that as well. And just to demonstrate it again, even though we don't have to do it over here, we can actually go to the, let's say, row 5 and highlight it. We can right click and we can press on insert, and automatically, notice what happens. Let's take the cursor off. You'll see you have an extra row. Okay, so the row is inserted above where we were. If you don't like that and you made a mistake or something, you can just go to the back arrow key, which is the undo, and click on that. Okay, so that's an easy way of doing it. And if you go to the B column and right click as well, you can insert as well. And notice what happens there. We now have an extra column put in. Let's go back and delete that. We are back there as well. And you'll notice under the right, when we click on the right, we can delete a column by the same way. We can clear the contents, and we can change the column width. Now, if I want this width to be a little bit wider, I'm not really sure how much wider, I can easily first see how wide it is by holding down the key, and it tells me now that it's 8.43. Now I can make this, let's say, 10, 12 by just dragging it out a little like that and trying to approximate it. But if I'm not good at that and I'd like it to be 11, I may miss it or whatever. So what I could easily do is highlight, let's say, 3 of those columns, and I can right click and go down to column width, and I can type in whatever I wish it to be. Let's make it 15. Everything will be 15. Press enter, and now you notice everything is 15 and it looks much nicer. So we now know how to add the rows. We could add columns, we can align the labels, we can change the column width, and we can change many columns as well. And we know how to delete columns and rows as well. It's a good idea to, and we know how to undo something that we've just typed in. Now, if I would like to center this title up here, WPC, I can easily do that by highlighting the rows. So let's highlight it from A down across to D, and let's bring our cursor to home, and let's click on where it says merge and center, and watch what happens. We now have it nicely spread across the screen, and it looks much, much nicer. We would like to rename our sheet from sheet 1 to budget. Double click on that and type in budget. And we can rename anything just by double clicking on the bottom where it says sheet 1, 2, or 3, etc. And we can also add more sheets down here, but at this point we really don't have to do that, so we can just leave it the way it is. One important thing might be to actually save this before we do too much. So to do that, we can go to the top of the screen and let's say save as for the first time, and let's give it a name. Notice the file name now says Book 1 XLSX. That's the extension in Excel. That's called Book 1. We'd like to call this budget, so let's just cross that out. Let's call this budget, and let's type in WPC. Where do you want to save it? Let's go to the top of the screen. In this situation, what I'll do, just again for demonstration purposes, and you can save it wherever you wish, whether on your local disk or whatever, I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I will now say save, and hopefully it is now saved. How do I know if it's saved? Well, I can now get rid of it and then start it again, and you will see it is saved. I can leave this for you as an exercise to check out. But now we know how to create a simple budget. Let's do one last thing. Let's create a graph of some of this information by doing the following. Let's highlight the data we would like to graph, and let's highlight, let's say, the January, February, and March area, and we'd like to highlight the current assets. So in this case, let's go down and hold down the control key and press the enter, and we now have two sections highlighted. Click on insert. Let's click on a graph. In this case, let's say a column. Let's choose one of those graphs. There are many to choose. Let's just choose a simple graph. Let's say, let's choose the very first one, and notice what we have. It says current assets. We have January, February, and March, and we can slide the graph over or down, however we wish. Let's put it down, and we see the months, and you notice the current assets going from a certain number and up. We will, in a later module, see how to make this look nicer by putting in titles, etc., which are not automatically put in, changing the scale, etc. But I think we've covered the basics of creating a chart from data which is from a budget. One last point to save you time. If we would like to add a column, we did see, for example, if we go to column G and we'd like to add a column, we can right click and then we can go to insert, and then automatically a column is inserted. Let's go back. But sometimes you may want to add multiple columns, and if I would like to add, let's say, 3 columns, if I highlight 3 columns and right click and then go to insert, you'll see automatically that we do have now 3 columns that have been inserted. And if you wish, you want to put them in on another location, obviously. Let's do it over here by B, C, and D. Right click and say insert, and you see again you have the 3 columns that are inserted. We can do the same thing with rows. Just to illustrate that as well, let's put in, let's add 3 rows. Just highlight the 3 rows, and let's right click, and let's click on insert, and we now have 3 additional rows.